Okay, so you always have to start a halacha with a story from the Rebbe. So the story is there's a shliach in Minnesota. His name is Rabbi Usher Zeilengold. The Zang is in Stark. And when he was a young bacher, so he is related to, the famous store on Kingston Avenue, Marmelstein's Kosher Food. That's our favorite eatery. So he somehow is related to people from there. And they had a standing order that they would deliver to the Rebbe's house every Thursday a barbecue chicken, and whatever else it was for Shabbos. And so they would always send it with a shikingel. He was a young bacher, and he's a relative, so he sometimes was able to do it. And he always said that the Rebbetzin would answer the door. It was nice to him, gave him a quarter tip. A quarter tip was nice. One time he comes and he wants to deliver the package, and he sees that nobody's there. He's knocking, and nobody's there. So he leaves the package by the door. Okay, he didn't want to go back with it. He leaves the package by the door, and it was a Shabbos food, whatever, So next week when he came back and did the standard delivery, the Rebbetzin answers the door and says, "Please don't do it again." I'm short in Yiddish. "Please don't do it again next time. Weil mein Mann hat nicht gewollt essen the Fleisch." Okay, obviously it wasn't a bag. Okay, that's a nice story, but the story is very relevant today because today's days, every time somebody gets a little itch and he's a little hungry, he does a DoorDash. He does a this delivery, and every store has deliveries for food. And the question is, could you actually rely that what you ordered from SM Bench or whatever the most meal mart is actually the food that's being delivered? Because the one delivering it is not necessarily Jewish. And could Garbi, if he's Jewish and he's a Yisrael Chashud, is even more suspicious, Rahman al-Islam, than if it's a Mexican Goy delivering it, who says that the Goy didn't decide he wants to taste what a corned beef sandwich is, and he swapped the corned beef with something else. So there are two halachas, two simanim Shulchan Aruch that are intertwined. Really, they speak about the same thing, but there's a separation. In Shulchan Aruch and Yeridea, Siman Samach Gimel is Basar Shena Salomon Ayin. That's Siman Samach Gimel. That's 2 or 3 sifim, and that's pretty simple. I would like to ask you, if you want to leave with a Dover Shalom, is the next couple of days is one Siman in Shulchan Aruch, and that's Siman Kuf Yud Ches. Siman Kuf Yud Ches is what? 13 sifim, and that talks about all the food, any food, that has a downtime. Downtime is it wasn't under a watchful eye. How do you know that what you're getting is actually? So I made a lot of videos about different questions. Lamashal, you go to gas stations. The gas stations are not Jewish, but they're in a Jewish neighborhood. So every Yid is buying coffee. Forget about the shayla about the coffee, but they have milk in the coffee also. So they have actually in the fridge they have a couple of bottles of Chalav Yisrael milk. The Chalav Yisrael milk that you're pouring into your coffee is not closed. It's already open. Since 5 a.m, people. How do you know that when you came in and the bottle of milk was half empty? How do you know the guy didn't run out and pour in some Kemp milk there? He doesn't even have one chaysim. Forget about. All these shilas are based on Siman Kuf Yud Ches, which is when you need chaysim echad. When do you need shtei chaysamis? And what's the reason? And how do we get around it? So let me give you. I'm going to give you just a blueprint about the Siman Kuf Yud Ches. I told you Siman Kuf Yud Ches is 13 seifim, but I'll divide it into categories. The first couple of seifim talk about the general halacha, for what foods or for what. It's not even foods. It's actually even one of the things you need a chaysam or shtei chaysam is just tchelis. If you really want to know if you're getting the real tchelis, because the guy in Bnei Brak did it, or wherever it is, or in Breslev, so you have to, until it came to you, you have to make sure it has shtei chaysamis. That's one opinion. The only reason the Shulchan Aruch doesn't mention tchelis because it's not noig bismanenu. That's what the poskim say. However, in the Gemara said chelas needs. So it's not only a food item; it's all items that you want to have a siman kashrus. It's not necessarily what you think it is. It is what it is. So in Sif Aleph and Beis talks about what do you got to do to make sure you're allowed to use, and the credibility of the thing is still there. So depending on what type of item, some things need chosem echad, some things need more than chosem echad, and need shtei chesamis. That's Sif Aleph and Beis, and you'll see the big shach here discusses, well, how do you draw the line? What would need chosem echad? What do you need more? There are basically three shittas. Rashi's shitta is anything that's expensive that the guy could swap and make a quick buck. Then what's the catch of the chosem echad shtei chesamis? The catch is to prevent a guy from swapping it or using it or whatever it is. Why would a guy do it? Because he wants to try it, he wants to benefit from it or whatever. But chafart, you're putting things over there to make it more difficult. So if it's something that it's worthwhile for him to go through the bother, I once saw a YouTube clip they were showing that a guy in one of these geschäftelach, they're selling food. He's sitting in the back of the store, and he's taking all the cookies that are outdated and repackaging into a new package, and there's a new date in there. I mean, they were out. How do you know how much effort the guy is going to put into that you get caught? So Rashi says when it's the mayim yakar and when it's an expensive item, he can make a lot of money quick. For them, he'll go through a bother. Chosem echad won't scare him off. You need shtei chesamis. However, if it's something cheap, it's not worthwhile for him to go through the risk to try to tamper with the chosem. And for that, chosem echad is good enough. That's one shitta. The second shitta is Rabbeinu Ephraim. Rabbeinu Ephraim says that the difference between the items that we're dealing with, if the isser is be'ain, then if the isser is be'ain, the possible isser being be'ain, you need to have shtei chesamis. If it's a question of taruvas isser, all right, we'll let it be chosem echad. And then there's the most common shita is the difference between the isser deiraisa and the isser derabbanan. Anytime that it's a chash isser deiraisa, you have to have shtei chesamis to be secure that there's no mess up here. If it's a chash isser derabbanan, no. At least one chosem will satisfy it. So the first couple seifim talk about when you need chosem echad, when you need shtei chesamis. It starts off with a small piece of Gemara. This is a Gemara in Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah Lametes Amud Aleph on the bottom of the page. Turns to Lametes Amud Beis, about 10 lines. The whole sugya of chosem echad shtei chesamis is 5 lines in the Gemara. It's a very simple thing, but you'll come out with a nice. You'll know things. That's what the Wilhelms are famous for. You know things that nobody else knows. You know what I mean? Okay. All right. Number one. That's the first two sifim. Then the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, you want me to make a chosem? You want me to make a shtei chesamis? What is a chosem? What would be enough as a chosem? What means shtei chesamis? And that's very practical today. Today, what a common thing they do is they put kosher tape. They call it. They put the bag. They staple the bag, and they put kosher tape, and they consider that shtei chesamis. We had a guy in Minnesota. He's a goy, but he is a goy that knew Shulchan Aruch better than most of the people in Minnesota knew Shulchan Aruch, and he was the Shabbos goy. And Rahman al-Tan, if anybody was ever in the hospital, he knew to help out. He would come to see if you need anything, and he would go to the family, and he would bring whatever you need. So I remember many times where people would prepare food and say, okay, Jonathan, could you bring it to the hospital? And he would come and pick it up. He says, I can't take it. Why can't he take it? He says, if you don't double wrap it, he won't be able to eat it because I'm delivering it. I'm a good. And where is also shnei chesamis? Shnei chesamis is in planes and all the food that you have to know when you need chosem echad, when you need shnei chesamis, and what is a real chosem and what is not a real chosem. That's the second section. The third section is there any replacement for a chosem? Is there any ways when you don't even need a chosem? Is there tvias ayin simanim? What else could replace if you see the cut It's a Sayidish cut. That's the next section. And the fourth section is even more practical, and that is wait, hold on. You're talking about only food deliveries? Who doesn't have a cleaning lady in their house? There's many times you leave your food in your house, and you go out, and the cleaning lady who's not a from a yid is a goy to sit in your house. What happens if she saw a nice corned beef sandwich, and she ate it, and she's going to put it back with her sandwich? Or it goes even further. How about if you leave kalim in the house? How do you, that's really connected to a later simon also. How do you know she didn't use the keli while you're not there? That's a whole other question. So these are 4 sections in the Shnei Chesamas. So let's start with the Basar Shena Salomon Ayin, because that's Siman Samach Gimel. I want to clarify the different halachas. So by Basar Shena Salomon Ayin, there's a very, very famous story. There's a very famous story that there was one time that in the Olam HaTorah and the Lutvische Welt, they were very much speaking about this story. Torah foresees everything. There was this guy who was flying in a plane, and this is the times when the plane, you got a kosher meal, and he sat down, he got his kosher meal. He opens the meal, and he had to go to the bathroom. So he stands up and goes to the bathroom, comes back 5 minutes later, and says, I can't eat it. I opened it up, and I'm surrounded by goyim, and how do I know? So he puts it aside, he's not eating it. So his neighbor, who was a guy, the guy sitting next to him was a guy, says, Rabbi, Mister, why are you not eating it? He says, because our Jewish law doesn't let us eat it. Why not? Because he tells them it might be tampered, it might be used, or somebody. You guys, you thought about everything. I'll tell you the truth. I always dreamt of having a kosher hot dog. And when you left, I actually took, I gave you back. And the Olam HaTorah was talking about this. So I actually heard that you know Rabbi Tauber from Beis Yehuda, Beis Yehuda, right? The shul, La Brea. It's Rabbi Tauber. What's his name, right? Hello, where are you guys? So Rabbi Tauber, who is a very learned dayan, he says that story is a nice story, but it's a lumdisha twist. He says if when the yid sits down, forget about the issue of Basar Shena Salomon Ayin. But if the guy tells him that he swapped something, you don't have to trust him. A guy has no namonos. He's lying. So he had a whole twist with that story. So let's talk a minute about Basar Shena Salomon Ayin, and then we'll get to the Shtei Chesamas. Basar Shena Salomon Ayin is a sugya in Chulin Daf Tzadik Hey. There's a machlokes over there between Rav and Levi. Now people think the difference between Basar Shena Salomon Ayin and what we're learning here in Shtei Chesamas, Basar Shena Salomon Ayin is a very weird chash. If you left Basar around unwatched, we're afraid not a goy is going to come and take it away. We're afraid, you're not allowed to do that. The Marshal says you're not allowed to do that. This is the rice according to Marshal.
It's very weird.
You're afraid that a raven is going to see a nice piece of meat and take it away. But taking it away, I see it's missing. No, he takes away your piece of meat, and when you came back and you saw something there, it wasn't the meat that you left. The Oirev came and took it away and swapped it. That's the Gemara in Chulin Tzadik Hey. How strict are we? We always know the famous Gemara, if you find meat on the street and there's butchers, you don't know if it came from the kosher butcher or not. But over here, there's a whole other shash. You're in your house, you're on your back porch, and you left a hot dog there. Lav dafka, you can eat the hot dog now, because if you left it unwatched, a raven came and took your hot dog and dropped off what's the famous company? No, what's the famous company? The Goyish company? Oscar Myers, yeah? Okay. So, there's a din of Gilui. The din of Gilui is any liquid that's left unwatched. So Gilui, the chash is that a nachash came in there and drank some and left its venom, and because it left its venom, it's a sakana. So you're not allowed to drink any liquid that's gilui. That's in the time of the Gemara. Comes the Shulchan Aruch in Kuf Tes Zayin, Yerdei Kuf Tes Zayin, says, Bismanenu, we don't live in Africa somewhere. We don't have, happens to be, we have bears here. But we're living in places where there's no dangerous snakes, so there's no gilui anymore. Incidentally, that halacha is a isnam of a halacha, because from there you learn that chamira sakanta me'isura, in what way? Isser could become batal b'shishim. Sakona, how much venom did the snake drop? A drop, an ounce. And he dropped it into a bucket this size, a barrel, a big size. Fotoch dav zayin, as batal b'shishim, batal ba'alef, batal, the barrel is 1,000 times the size. And nevertheless, Misad Gili becomes Usher. So you see, some Machlaik is a Shach and other person. You see Chamira Sekanta Misura. Okay, good. So, but we do see that because today's days we don't live among snakes, there is no Chash Gili today. And the Pischei Tshuva brings that Yitaka is no Chash Gili, but if a person, first of all, it says the girl was makbid anyway. It says Kola Hayori Dvar Hashem, I forgot the Lashon, should be makbid. Gili you don't have. But practically, if you're going camping somewhere in the summer, if you're going somewhere camping and you are in the woods, then for sure you have to be concerned about Gili. It's only because you are in a domesticated area, in a place where there isn't. So Shulchan Aruch says you don't have Gili. So Ebazay, translate that into the Eirev. We have Eirev anywhere around there. So the Shulchan Aruch speaks about if there is in Samach Beis, if there is no Eirev where we live, or what happens if you come back, you left a piece of meat on the hook, and you come back and you see a piece of meat is weiter on the hook. The Eirev didn't take it off the hook and put it back on the hook. He would have dropped it somewhere. He would have left it on the table. So, is there any wiggle room in that halacha? That's by Basish and the Solomon Ayin, and over there is specifically a strange chumrah, and it's a chumrah. The Gemara says it's a chumrah. The Gemara says Rav established that chumrah because he saw that Yidden Bechlal were mekel and Isurim. He says, let me close this up. Let me tighten this zehirus, and therefore Basish and the Solomon Ayin is out of the question. But that's specifically what Basar comes to Kuf Yud Zayin. Over here, the Mechaber says like this: Kol davar she'asur min haTorah, which when you look in the Gemara in Yerushalmi, you look in the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, the Gemara doesn't make a difference between us ism and haTorah, ism and the Rabbanan. The Gemara makes a difference between chavis and champag. Chavis, the Rosh Tevis of chavis needs shtei chaysamis. The Rosh Tevis of champag needs chaysam echad. What's chavis? So originally chavis was chalav, which we take out chalav. Chalav is enough chaysam echad because no big deal. Why would the guy is not going to make so much money by swapping chalav Yisrael for not chalav Yisrael? So you just scare him off with one chaysam. But a chavis is chatichas dog, a fish that ain't by simon. That could be you need shtei chaysamis. Basar needs shtei chaysamis. Yayin needs shtei chaysamis, and tchelis needs shtei chaysamis. Now remember, there are three different reasons. Somehow the three reasons, each one says it applies by these things. By yayin, even though it's not expensive, but it's chivas yayin nesach. A guy wants wine so much for yayin nesach, he'll do anything to help. Okay, but that's fine. But those things need shtei chaysamis. Champag needs chaysam echad. Champag. He goes on to say, Murias, you'll see in the Shulchan Aruch, things that a guy might swap and benefit, but it's no big gain for him. You'll scare him off with one chaysam. So now, interesting thing, the Prima Godim in Hilchas Pesach says two things that are very interesting. First of all, when you box a matzah, when you're boxing a matzah, do you need shtei? That's kosher lePesach. Should you need shtei chaysamis or chaysam echad? So l'chayra, matzah is very expensive. It's $45 a pound there, and It's chash yisur deraisa. So according to the Primi Gadim, you need to have shtei chesamis, which is interesting. 'Cause I don't think they do that here, unless you the inside paper or whatever. The Primi Gadim says I don't. The Alter Rebbe I don't see it mentioning it, but the Primi Gadim says that. But the Primi Gadim does say a very interesting thing. He says if a person sold somebody else food, and he didn't sell it with a chaysim, so now by the time it comes to the next guy, he can't eat it because there wasn't a chaysim, but he paid for it already. He says, listen to this. He says the moicher has to pay him for the money. Why? Because al pi halacha there's two gedarim. There's garmi and there's grama. Garmi is when it's a direct hezek, and grama is an indirect hezek. So for a direct hezek, you have to pay. For a ricocheted hezek, it's a grama. It's lav dafke. I didn't mean it. It wasn't me. It came from that way. This, says the Prima Gadim, when you send food and it wasn't a chaysam echad, it's garmi. It's a sure thing. It's definitely a sure thing that the guy will swap it, and because it's a garmi, you have to pay him for that. So with the chash that a guy will swap it, in Achrayim there is a machlokes if it's a chash de'iraisa or a chash de'rabbanan. Are we this chash that he'll swap it? I'm not asking is it only by Yisur de'iraisa or Yisur de'rabbanan. Who originated the chash? This whole thing that you need chaysam echad or shnei chaysamas. And one of the differences it would be what happens if the guy delivering the food or the guy who was involved with your food temporarily is a guy that will never touch your food. He's a rich man. It's a guy that he'll never do that. He's an edel guy. Could I say it doesn't apply by him? Or by chash yisur deraisa, if that's what the Torah was chayshus, you can't, and he'd have a svek. Yeah. Incidentally, I just saw the Darkei Tshuva brings a shaila. The Darkei Tshuva brings a shaila, and as I saw, I thought it's very, very, if you're sending food to a shliach in some third world country. I know my nephew is in Jamaica, and every time people are flying there, they're bringing chickens. What happens when you go through customs? What happens when you go through customs? You never know what they're opening. And a lot of times you get your suitcase and you find a piece of paper in there. What's the piece of paper? They opened it. They wanted to see what it was. Whoa! You sent a box of chickens, and the guy opens it, and it's all on his own. I didn't think the shayla that way. You could say that every chicken is already wrapped inside. It's not only in the box. I don't know how we prevent that because they do open the boxes. That's a fact. And the Darkei Tshuva, there was a shayla that they were transporting chaylev, kosher chaylev, from city to city, whatever it is. It's not city to city, country to country, and by the border, it was put in storage, and they have to inspect it. Luckily, one of the inspectors there are Jewish, and one of the inspectors are not Jewish. So should we assume that the guy never did it on himself? As long as there was a yid there, so he asked. There was a shayla. Could you end up using that chaylev, the kosher chaylev, when it gets there, because it was in the border patrol only by a guy? And he says there's a svek. It's how the svek you're allowed to, but he uses a lumdus. His lumdus he uses the guy who is their inspector is not the regular guy. A regular guy in the street, he's hungry, he needs a sandwich, he might swap it. This guy is with the badge. This guy has a reputation. And we have a chazaka of loymara umnasoi. We have this also a lot in smicha, that a guy who has a kfela, a chef, you trust him even though he's a guy because loymara umnasoi. He knows if he tells you it tastes a little porky, if he tells you it's too much garlic here, and then somebody else will say, it doesn't taste garlic, he's going to lose his reputation. So despite the fact that he doesn't have a koyach and amonus, his chazaka of leimar and menasoi will give him his koyach and amonus. So the Darkei Tshuva brings that this guy, the inspector, only because of his chazaka, that he won't tamper with its numbers or he loses his reputation, we could do it. Last point. There's a crazy Ramah. First of all, you have to know, in the Gemara it says that chavis needs shtei chesamis, and champag needs chosem echad. What do you mean it needs? It needs when? When is it needed? When? For what? It just says chavis needs shtei chosemis and champag needs chosem echad. It doesn't say if what. If I leave it in my house. In the Shulchan Aruch, indirectly, there's two different scenarios. One scenario is if a delivery boy, sholchoi b'yad akum. Another scenario, which is very, very much applicable today's days, every guy has a warehouse, Amazon warehouse. Where's the Amazon warehouse? In some hick town redneck place where it's goyim. You're storing your items amongst the goyim. That's hifkid b'yad nachri. Which is worse? Sheleach b'yad nachri or hifkid b'yad nachri? Which is worse? You're going to say the wrong one. Hifkid. Wrong. Why do you have to pick the wrong one? Sheleach b'yad nachri, you're the sender, somebody else is getting it. So there is a mismatch. He doesn't necessarily know what you know. By hifkid chachik, you're going to get it back. So you'll be able to verify if it's good. So there's two levels. But it's funny, the Gemara says, chavis needs shtei chosemis. When? If I leave it in my house, I can't leave my house without shtei chosemis? No. So the Shulchan Aruch says, and it's another big discussion, because the Lashon of Shulchan Aruch is, I went to the wrong simon. Seems to be that it's b'di'evid. Yayin ubasar v'chatichas dog shehifkid oishalach biyadei v'yachavim tzarich shnei chesamis. It's only b'di'evid. If I have shnei chesamis, that's how I do it l'chatchila. That's how the whole world is doing business now. You make sure you have shnei chesamis, then l'chatchila you could do it. And the Shach is murdered in this. It's not a b'di'evid thing. This is how we do it. So much so, there was a very big controversy that happened a couple of months ago. There was a restaurant in New Jersey, a Chinese restaurant, I think it was. And this Chinese, you heard about it? Why do you know about it?
It's going around me now.
But I thought you only have your nose in the books.
I heard that.
It's the charaya. So there's a Chinese restaurant that they found out that he ran out of chicken schnitzel, and he went to, what's it called? He went to Restaurant Depot, and he bought more schnitzel. And obviously it wasn't kosher schnitzel. Restaurant Depot. So, OK is the one that gives a hechsher to that restaurant. And I remember somebody called me from OK because I'm close to him. He says, doesn't Shulchan Aruch say that as long as you do what you're supposed to do, if you did, there's a very interesting, the Shulchan Aruch Siv Beis. Kivon shehichtimoy karoi, if you only did what you're supposed to do, and you did the right amount of chesamis. What's the right amount of chesamis? Either shtei chesamis b'dvarim shetzarich shnayim, or echad b'dvarim shedai be'echad. If you did that, ein tzarich lachzor acharov. You don't have to be a litvak. Do I still see the chesim? As long as it came to you, it came to the other person. If you did what's the cheshbon? The cheshbon is that you're diverting the guy from wanting to play around. It's like when you put a video camera and bulletproof glass, and you know a lot of people say, what's the Yiddish cup? You put a sign outside that says alarm system. Nobody has an alarm system. They put they think when the guy sees the alarm system, oh, there must be an alarm system. If you're doing all those things, you're telling the guy not to steal here, steal somewhere else. So when you do the shtei chesamis, the chazaka is he didn't tamper it. So when the guy gets it, as long as he knows that you did the right thing, he doesn't have. Do I have to see the? If it's glaring and obvious that it's ripped open, okay. But to assume that something went wrong, you don't have to. So this is the halacha of the shtei chesamis. But he wanted to cover the back. He said, we did everything right. We had the shteiches. I don't remember. I just remember that question he wanted.
The kid from Restaurant Depot, what did he have?
I don't know. Listen to this. You flunked once. You ready for a second flunker? What's worse? Sending biyad goy or sending biyad Yisrael chashuv?
You already answered that question at the beginning.
How?
You said in the beginning.
Why? I didn't ask. I asked.
You said it could be worse.
Why? Listen. Comes the Ramah, and the Ramah says V'yei shoymrim, are those that say this whole halacha of shtei chesamis. Loi be'inam beis chesamis, rak b'Yisrael chashud. A guy, you don't even need shtei chesamis. You think the guy wants your what's it called? Your corned beef sandwich. He'll eat his pork chops. He'll eat his ham and cheese. It's good for them. He's not interested in your pork chops. So, why should he do it? Why should he do it? What's hotter from them? A Yisrael chashud over there. Over there, I'm more worried. Zok the shach. Why? The God ali inyan zemei ovegechavim. A Yisrael chashud is even worse than lahavdol agoy. Lefi shehu batuach sheyaminu. Nobody's going to chat. Nobody's going to doubt me. V'loy mirtas. Nothing will scare him off. Whatever you'll do, he says, no, they would never doubt me. So therefore, you need chaysim, shtei chaysamis. But a guy knows that we don't trust him anyways. We're always going to be suspicious. So by a guy, you don't even avo ba'evigechavim shari hakol shari aydei chaysim echad.
What is chashud?
The chashud is what creates the thing.
Chashud, then he's not gonna. Then he's gonna know that you're gonna be.
But he's try. But he, in other words, you're saying since he's a chashud,
He knows that you're not gonna live anymore. I think it's
but we're always. I just told somebody I have a breslov of a chassid a Talmud. So we were talking about that. The Rebbe says we're very much a person has to know his milas also. A person. Right? She says, hey, that's mamish the breslov of a Torah. Don't give up. Ain't sham Yush. He said, I see Yush, Breslov and Chabad is mamish the same. I said, true. We're very in that thing to build up your self-confidence. But there's one big difference, and he agreed with me. He says, in Breslov they say this about yourself: never give up. Don't be down. This following you as far as you fell. There's always. I once read a geschmacke word. In Adonai Olam, you say, "Bli reishis, bli tachlis." So I heard this from a Vishnitzer Rebbe, and he says, "Huh?"
Which one?
Actually, this one is a famous one because he's in Yerushalayim, and he does a lot of good things he has very much connections to hospitals, and he helps people and doctors. He helps a lot of doctors. He helps people never are sick. So I heard him say, shir. So he said, "Beli reishis, beli tachlis." If a person doesn't believe that he has always a reishis, he could always start again, beli tachlis. He'll never succeed. A person has to know, however much he fell, he's always a reishis. I could always start again. Beautiful, beautiful word. So I tell him the difference between Chabad and Breslov. Breslov says as beli reishis, beli tachlis. Ain't sham yush. Whatever you did, forget about it, start good. Chabad took it to the next level. It's not only about me. When I see somebody else behaving that way, I say about him. I don't give up about him either. It's not only about, he said, you're right. I always say, Breslov is a very selfish chassidus. It's very about taking care of yourself. It's true. So the chashud, back to your thing. The chashud, even though he is a chashud and they're not putting him in a mizrach band, but he's the chfarta yid. We're still going to, he'll never do that. He'll never do that, right? And we're going to think, and he thinks we'll never think he did such a bad thing. And the truth will be different. So according to the Ramah, you will need more chaysamis by a Yisrael chashud than a goy. Lavnu.